Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of Know Your Major. We have with us Ms. Mansi Kenkere, and she has done her BS in Financial Actuarial Mathematics from UCLA, and post that currently she's working with New York Life Insurance Company. Thanks, Mansi. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Why don't we start with introduction? I know I've done a very brief, but why don't you start? Where did you do your schooling, then college, and obviously about work life now?
So I went to Malayadati International School for my 11th and 12th grades in Bangalore. And then I moved to the US for college. I went to UCLA in California. So that was a 4-year undergrad degree. And then I moved to New York for work, and I work as an actuary at New York Life Insurance Company.
Great. And so did you enter to the college with the specific major in mind? Was it this specific major, or did you start with something else and then move to something else?
So I started as just a math major, but I knew that UCLA had a lot of different types of math majors. There was math and econ, pure math, applied math, financial, actuarial math. So I wanted to figure out which specific math major, and I did explore some other economics and finance related majors as well.
Got it. And was there a particular year when you had to make this shift from normal mathematics to a specified mathematics?
I think I did it in my second year of college, but I don't think there was a deadline as long as you kind of got through all of the courses. It was difficult to enroll in upper division courses unless you had committed to a major. So, in that sense, there was a pressure of committing, but otherwise, you could still graduate on time if you hadn't committed to it.
Great. I think with that, let's try and deep dive. And I think we will go in sequence, right? So I think let's start with first,
Mhm.
when you were in school. I know it was pretty long back, but let's try and go back to those memory lanes. So how did you go about selecting your major, right? Was there any parents' influence, family, some sort of background that made you select maths as a major? What led you decide this specific major?
Actually, for most of my life, I wanted to be a doctor. And then in the 11th and 12th grade, that changed a little bit because I decided I want to go to the US. And doctor degrees in the US are like 8 years plus a lot of like residency and everything. And then I decided if I had to pick between medicine versus going to the US, I prefer going to the US. My favorite subject during high school was math. So that's where I kind of wanted to start out, but I wasn't sure at all. And again, that's why I picked to go to the US because it gives you the opportunity to kind of test out few courses before you commit to a specific major.
Got it. So is it good to assume that it was in grade 11 when you decided you would do maths as a major?
Yeah, grade 11, 12. Basically, when I applied, I wasn't sure before actually applying, and then once I researched universities, I looked at what courses different colleges were offering, and then I started applying to different math programs at all of my universities.
Oh, very interesting. So what you're telling me that when you started applying, you decided your major. Now let's take a step back, right? When you're in grade 10, grade 11, people end up doing some sort of projects, internship, research work, and things like that in a particular domain that they really wish to pursue further, right? So what was the major at that point of time in your mind when you are trying to do all of this, or did you not do it?
Yeah, so I had no idea. I didn't put in any effort, any work towards college applications until middle of 11th grade, I think, which is when I decided to go to the US. And then I started doing SAT prep, ACT prep. I didn't have time to take APs or do any external projects. I even just took the exams once, ran out of time, kind of did everything very last minute, which in some ways I'm like, if I started earlier, maybe I could have gotten into a different college, different program. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of glad where I ended up. And I was also not stressed out for my high school. I enjoyed myself. So I think it all worked out, even though I didn't do those extra projects that I could have done.
Very interesting. And I wish everybody can land into UCLA by not doing it. So I'm sure there are other that you already had in your profile. So I don't want the audience to kind of get a wrong picture that you could get into UCLA without doing. Maybe for the audience, maybe you guys don't know her SAT scores. Maybe you guys know her ACT scores. You don't know her academic scores. And I think there is a lot of roles to be played. Some people end up doing those projects for towards the college, and in some other students you will see that they would anyways be doing it, right? So I don't want the audience to take a wrong message from
Yeah,
that you can get
yeah.
to UCLA without doing anything. That's the wrong message. She already
Yeah,
did a lot
yeah.
of stuff. I don't know, yeah, just for the sake of the audience, could you tell us like quickly about your 12th percentage and maybe your SAT scores?
Oh God, I don't even remember if
Vaguely, I think roughly.
oh, my SAT score I think was 1470 or 1490 out of 1600.
Okay.
ACT was 33, I think.
Okay.
Um, I do not remember my 12th grade
12th
scores.
grade
It was
scores.
somewhere
Okay.
in 90%
Got it.
ish, 93, 94%, something like that.
Got it. No, great. I think perfect. And so I think my next question, I think you have answered it already, but let me still ask if there's something else that you want to add. So did you explore any other major before settling into this major while you were selecting it, or in college as well, right? Because in US you do have that option.
So like I said, while I was applying, I don't think I considered too many options. It was a pretty quick decision because
Right.
I knew I'd have the flexibility once I actually moved here.
Right.
When I did move here, I started taking a few different courses. I took some introductory economics courses, some introductory management courses, obviously the math courses. Um, I was considering CS at one point just because of the job prospects and everything. I had never kind of done a CS course before. I never had it as an elective in school or anything. But UCLA didn't have a CS minor. So I would have to switch to the engineering school and fully commit to doing a CS major, which I wasn't ready to do because I didn't know enough about it. So that's one thing I would have liked to try, but I didn't end up trying. But yeah, I did spend, I would say, my freshman year trying out a few different courses, but a lot of them overlapped with the major that I ended up choosing. So it wasn't like I did courses that didn't contribute to that final major requirements.
Interesting. Just wanted to understand, right? So you did spoke about when you go to US, you have an option to change your major, right? So how difficult would it be, let's say, when you get admitted as a maths major and you want to do a computer science major, which let's say is more difficult to get in, right? Is it
Mhm.
easy? Is it difficult? Or I mean, how does that process really go?
Yeah. So I do think it depends on the specific university. For
Uh-huh.
me, math and econ were under the College of Arts and Sciences,
Mhm.
and CS was under the College of Engineering. And I believe the engineering school was more challenging to get into. So to go from arts and letters and sciences to the engineering school, you had to apply and you had to have a certain GPA to do that. I don't think the other way would have been difficult, but yeah, so you had to submit an application and then kind of get accepted into the school and have to do a certain number of courses. You can't just go there and then decide you don't want it after one course and leave again. So there were some specific requirements. Yeah, it wasn't very easy to switch around.
Got it. Interesting, but I think looks like still a good option. Though, just a quick question on since you spoke about School of Arts, right? So, is your course comes under the STEM or is it a non-STEM course?
It is a STEM
It is a
course.
STEM course.
Yeah. I think it used to be called a BA in
Yeah,
math, then they passed some kind of rule which changed it to a BS. But I think irrespective of whether it was a BA or BS, the math version was always considered STEM. And that is something I was looking for. I wanted the 3 years that you get with
yeah,
a STEM degree to work in the US. So I
yeah.
knew that I wanted to do something that falls under that category.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's an important insight I wanted to bring out here that don't just go by name of BA or BS. I was talking to another student in one of the other podcasts, and we got the same thing, right? That it's not necessary that all BA courses will be non-STEM courses, right? Even
Yeah.
though they might
Yeah.
be in School of Arts, but they could still be a STEM course. So I think it's important for people to do individual research and then figure out whether that course qualify for to be a STEM course or not. Great, that's
Mm-hmm.
super helpful. Let's get into the college, right? So you landed up in college with the major that you wanted to do, and obviously one of the top college that you could get into. Can you share a bit about how your experience been in those 4 years of doing maths as a major? Anything extraordinary, anything that you want to talk about that you did during these 4 year of college that you want somebody who's looking at UCLA should explore?
For math specifically, we had an undergrad math students association, which I got involved in my freshman year itself. So if you're really interested in like participating in competitions and just being involved within the math community, kind of meeting new people, attending professor talks, that kind of thing, there was a club which allowed you to do that. So I got involved pretty early. And then by my senior year, I was the vice president of the club. So I think it gave me good exposure. And then also, it was a good thing to add to my resume to say, like, I really was interested in math and I stayed involved. Um, yeah, so that was the extracurricular aspect of doing math. In general, UCLA is a reputed school for math, which while I was applying, I didn't know in specific. I think when I committed to UCLA, I said, oh, it's a good school in general, and I'm not sure about my major. So I'd rather go to a school that's good at most majors than something that's very specific to like CS or math or whatever. And then it ended up being that UCLA is very good for math. So to get a degree out of there was a big deal. So yeah, I did have access to a lot of professors who do really big research projects. If you want to get involved, you can even kind of shadow them, do research with them. And there were a lot of opportunities for people who were looking for them. But again, you have to approach a professor, you have to put in the application and do the work. It doesn't just come to you, but
Right.
it is available.
Yeah, makes sense. Great. I think with that, let's try and move to the next part, which is your career goals, right? So, did you have specific career goals in mind that I want to be here in 5 years or here in 10 years? When you were selecting this as a major, obviously post you moved away from medicine, right? So with
Mm-hmm.
maths, did you know what sort of job, what sort of career goals you had in mind at that point of time?
Yeah, so initially I had no idea. Like I said, I chose math because I enjoyed it during my ISC math course. But after moving here, that's when I started thinking about what my career prospects were. And to me, I had three major options. There was either be a professor, which I knew I didn't want to do, get into research, like do a PhD, do a master's, PhD, all of that, start publishing books and everything. And again, I didn't think that's what I'd want. So the only third option in my mind was getting a corporate job which related to math or finance. Um, so initially I thought, okay, some business related role, finance, investment banking, consulting, that kind of thing. And that's when I stumbled upon just the actuarial profession. I hadn't heard of it before at all. There was an actuarial club at UCLA as well. I heard about that, got involved there, spoke to people who were already on that path. And then I kind of decided that's where I want to be. At the same time, I was testing out these other finance roles. There were other clubs at UCLA where I kind of um, I'd say got surface level understanding of what a banking or consulting role would be, and then finally decided I want to stick more towards my math background, and that's how I settled on being an actuary.
Got it. I think since this is a very unique stream, I would love to personally understand a little bit more about right? Like, what do you do really, right? In terms of job role, work prospect, I think that will be helpful as well.
So I work in an insurance company, and there's a lot of different functions that an actuary plays within an insurance company. It's not
Mhm.
a very specific role, but your general day to day will involve a lot of math, finance, stats, data stuff, which to me was very interesting because I didn't want to kind of, in my opinion, investment banking used less of um, the I don't think a math major would perfectly apply to investment banking. I felt like I would make better use of math in the actuarial role. Um, so at an insurance company, we work on pricing insurance products. We work on reserving for them, which means kind of setting aside money to pay out future claims, because the way that insurance works is you charge policyholders premiums today, and then you're paying out a death benefit later on in their life. So there's a lot of finance asset management that goes on behind it, where you're collecting money now, you want to invest it well, and then be able to pay out, have enough money to pay out later. So pricing, reserving for future payouts, asset liability management, and then there's other roles like cash flow projections, and yeah, there's a lot of different roles that I haven't even gotten to learn about yet. I work on a pricing team right now, so that's what I'm focused on. But over the course of my career, I will get exposure to these other roles as well.
Definitely sounds interesting, and probably one of the very few roles where you are doing what you have learned. In most of the cases, you end up doing something else as compared to what you have learned in college, right?
Hmm.
Not just you spoke about investment banking, but in general, that's how it is, right? You pick
Yeah.
up any stream for that matter. But good to hear that you're doing what you have learned, or at least
Hmm.
making use of what you have learned, right? It's interesting. Great. So I think let's move towards some advice for high school students, right? So put yourself in the shoes of a ninth grader, 10th grader, 11th grader who is currently confused between different majors, like you probably were at that point of time. What
Hmm.
would you advise them? What should they be doing? How should they go about selecting the right major for themselves? Do you have any techniques, strategies for them?
I think one thing is to not get super stressed out if you don't know what you want to do, because everyone is always trying to figure it out. Even once you've decided, things might change once you get to college. So you can do as much as you want and try to explore and try to figure it out. But if you don't have it figured out, there's always more time. There's people who do second and third degrees just because they decide they don't want to stick to the first one that they did. And like, it's not the end of the world if you don't know, because I also didn't know, and eventually things worked out. um I so I studied in ISC, and for me it was a little difficult because I think the Indian schooling system forces you to pick just four subjects, stick with those four subjects throughout, and not have exposure to anything else. So because I wanted to be a doctor, I did physics, chemistry, math, biology, and I never got to try out computer science, economics, which are things that eventually I was interested in. So if there's any way you can get exposure to things that aren't part of your curriculum but you are interested in, I think that's a good place to start, just to have an idea. Um, because although the US university system gives you the flexibility, the more you already know before getting in, it does play to your advantage, where you can choose your major early, you can kind of plan your courses based on that, you can plan for a double major, plan for minors. So the later you push that out, it does get hard to achieve all these different things. Like, you can still graduate on time, but having a plan early can be helpful. Um, so yeah, to get as much exposure as you can to things that you think you might be interested in.
Sure, got it. Makes sense. And so since we spoke about multiple times about going to college and then changing the major, there is another way in which you can probably go undecided, right? So what is your advice on that? I mean, I'm sure, I mean, you went with a particular major in mind. Firstly, do UCLA allow student to go as undecided major? And second, around you, when you have seen other students, how many students, I mean, in your mind would have come undecided? Is it okay to go undecided?
So UCLA did have an undecided major. I personally didn't do enough research on it because I had an idea of where I wanted to go. And again, I don't know how difficult it would be to transition into a challenging major because I, from undecided to math, I don't know if that's an easy transition. Maybe it is, but I didn't want to take that risk where I wouldn't get the major I'm kind of leaning towards.
Right.
Um, I don't think it's impossible though. Like if you truly are undecided, you can go in undecided. Um, most US universities have a lot of general education courses, which even if I am a math major, I had to take like a social science course, I had to take a life science course, I had to take a history and arts course, and all of those things. So that also gave me exposure to certain other subjects that I never would have taken otherwise. And um, I didn't end up transitioning to any of them, but I did get a chance to explore, which I thought was enough. But as an undecided major, I guess you get even more opportunity to explore those different types of courses.
Yeah, and just to add to it, what you said earlier, right? I think the more later you decide on the major, the more difficult it becomes for you to experiment in terms of if you want to do a minor, if you want to add another major. And I think then you might end up extending your degree itself, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so great. I think, but in your opinion, do you think does it play as a disadvantage to the student in general when they're applying? Would you know anything on that aspect?
I'm not sure
You're
during
not
the
sure.
application process. Yeah.
Sure, perfect. No, no problem. That's fine. Okay, great. So I think let's do some bit of reflection, right? So looking back, do you think is there something else you would have done differently, been selecting your major or when you were in college, right? If given a chance.
Mm-hmm. I think looking back 2 years after I've graduated, I'm very happy with how things went. But I know while I was doing it, I was very stressed out. I kept doubting whether I chose the right major. I was like, am I choosing for the right reasons? Am I really interested in this? Am I going to get the right job? So looking back, it's a very different perspective than when I was in the thick of it.
Got it.
Um, I think I did the best that I could based off of what I knew and based off of my interests. And yeah, early on during college, I did join these clubs and kind of explore even outside of courses to see what I'd be interested in. And I think that's all I could have done. One other thing is if I knew I wanted to come here earlier than I did, I would probably spend some time doing AP courses and all of that, which gives you a bit of an edge because you're doing an introductory math or introductory econ course that you don't need to do at university. So then you are ahead, you have those credits, and that gives you a little more time to explore the major that you want. So that's one thing I would have tried to do if I had the opportunity. But during my 4 years of college, I think I did everything that I wanted to.
Got it. No, interesting. So I think one takeaway probably from here is, uh, sometimes it's okay to pass through the thick and thin. You don't know how things would be at the end, right? So I think do your best in the time when you have,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, as long as you've given your 100%, you will end up at the right place in most of the chances. If not, then you always have an option to go back, do a second degree, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, right? Uh, Good, no, great. And I'm sure you probably would have done a couple of internships in between.
Yeah, so I did one internship in an economic role at Ernst and Young.
Okay,
That was more to explore what I'm interested in. At that point, I hadn't fully committed to becoming an actuary.
got it.
And then the following summer, I started taking actuarial exams, which is a big part of my profession. So my courses at college helped me pass those exams. Once I took those exams, the following summer I applied to an internship and then got a full-time offer from the same company. So I definitely think that's another advantage of knowing early, where you can start applying for internships, start working towards um, your career after college, because a lot, in my opinion, a lot of college is to get into a job. Kind of like once you're done with high school, you're like, oh, it seemed so difficult at the time, but after you're done, it's like, okay, now I got into my college, I have to focus on college. Once you're done with college, you get into a job and then you forget about your grades in college or anything.
Yeah.
So if you can start thinking about that earlier during your college career, that does give you an edge once you graduate, once you're interviewing for positions also.
Makes sense. Yeah. And that's the reality of life, right? The phase which will pass or the current phase will always be difficult than the past phase. Uh,
Yeah.
Gone are those days where, people will say these are board exam, the most important one, get done with this and then you're sorted, right?
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's not the reality. Then comes the college and
Yeah.
comes the job. And then there's problems that comes with the job as well, right? So,
Yeah.
good. I think glad. And I think thankfully in your case, because you're enjoying what you're doing, I think that's also super helpful, because I've spoken to almost 10 plus students so far in this podcast, and I know for a fact that there are students who are still trying to figure that out, right? So they would probably do one or two
Mhm.
jobs in a particular space and then take a call for themselves if they want to stick around or they want to change something, right? I also realize internship is also a great way to explore, because when you do the
Mhm.
2 months, 3 months sort of internship, you get some idea in terms of what this job role would look like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Again, I think on the final thoughts, is there anything else that you would like to share with the students who are looking to go outside of India? It could be US, UK, Canada, Singapore, any country for that matter. So any final advice?
I think outside of the major topic, I guess, I feel like just coming to the US, leaving home and coming to the US for college just helped me grow as a person. It wasn't just the course, it wasn't just the degree, although that was a very big part of it. I think there's so much learning outside of the academic part, which I don't think I would have gotten if I stayed at home, stayed in India. So I think I'm very grateful for that. And that does come from leaving home and being thrown into a new environment, helps you figure out stuff for yourself. So I think even if it seems hard at first, even if it's like a new environment, confusing, you don't know your major, you don't know how things are going to work, you don't know if you'll get a job at the end of it. I think just taking it one step at a time and making the most of those 4 years was very important for me and has helped me grow a lot through the process.
Nice. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Mansi. Thanks for your time and thanks for this candid conversation. I'm sure this was a unique major that we have spoken about. And I'm sure a lot of students who are interested in maths would largely end up doing computer science, but I think they would also probably end up exploring this as an option, or at least consider this as an option going forward. Right. Thank you. Thanks for
Yeah,
your time.
yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.